Today we're going to explore the climate change of New Mexico over the years. And to start with, we'll look at climate change. Climate change is a change of the usual weather found in a place. So you may have a place that's really rainy and suddenly it's very hot and dry. Reasons that the earth in general is getting warmer. The biggest one we do hear about quite often is the greenhouse gases we call global warming, and this is caused by humans. We've been a catalyst for fossil or greenhouse gases multiplying faster and faster because of our use of fossil fuels. We've become dependent upon it. This all started in the Industrial Revolution. In the 1750s, there were 280 ppm of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. By 2005, the levels of carbon dioxide has risen 380 ppm. This is an increase over 1/3. It's quite a substantial change in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And this is not something that if we just reduced our fossil fuels for the next year that we could see a decline. It would take a lot of change, a lot of mitigation for humans to be able to see actual decline in the carbon dioxide. Another reason for the climate change is the Earth's proximity to the sun. Sometimes we're actually closer, sometimes we're a little bit further away. Also, over the last 100 years, overall, the Earth has seen about a temperature raised about 1 degrees. These temperature raising is causing ice to melt. It's causing sea levels to rise. With rising heat, you're seeing changes in environments. You're seeing some places that were covered in snow that no longer are. You're seeing areas that were grasslands that are now deserts. Now, that doesn't mean everything is dying off. There are some places that are actually receiving more water now. So there is definitely shifts due to the changes in the climate. So some historical content of climate here in New Mexico. Very interesting to learn that if you go back million to 3 million years, the landscape here was covered in volcanoes. I've actually had the pleasure of being out to some of the volcanoes here near Albuquerque, but the oldest ones are the volcano field, the freestanding mountains in the volcano field in the San Antonio and Ute, and the lava domes that were formed in eruptions 3 million years ago. And also the San Luis Valley that started forming millions of years ago. So actually the San Antonio and Ute are in the San Luis Valley. It is very, very interesting piece of the past. And as you can imagine, volcanoes have created the very, very interesting land formations and mountains and valleys and craters all over New Mexico. You don't have to go far from where you are to see any kind of change that has kind of come from volcanic activity. Very interesting thing with the volcanoes. The San Luis Valley, because it had so many volcanoes, in the 60s was actually used. NASA actually used it for astronaut training. So that's a quick little fun fact. Now to switch to the modern climate. So New Mexico kind of falls into the Earth's change. In the last 100 years, they're seeing an increase in temperature about 1 degree higher. One of the biggest things that the temperature rise is causing is a diminishing snowpack. So this means up in our mountaintops, where we would see our nice white capped mountains, we are seeing that less and less. Because of the warm temperatures, it's melting off faster. It's causing less tourism because there are a lot of skiing opportunities here in New Mexico, and with the snowpack melting off, it causes it to diminish. There's also a shift in tree line as the high altitude trees can actually grow higher now. I mean, that could actually help if we're needing more trees due to others being farmed off or due to logging. But in the downside, there's going to be more demand for water with less available. And this would be because as the snowpack is diminishing, we're not seeing it up there. So there's no melt and runoff that there normally would be. So farms need more water, the trees need more water, the river needs more water. So it actually is going to create a low supply. And this will cause definitely hard times for farmlands. They'll have to find alternative ways to get waters to their lands to make sure that they're being kept at the right moisture to grow. So, environmental influences. So, extreme heat actually causes a lot of different changes. It creates more wildfires just because it dries out all the land. You think of all the trees and the grasslands that we have around here. So now they're all dead and it doesn't take much for them to go up. So more wildfires can actually, if we see enough of them, it can shift the environment around us. And that would be, say, the grasslands changing to deserts. This could have impact on the wildlife here. This could have impact on the infrastructure here. Definitely, extreme heat brings a lot of problems with it. And also another environmental influence would be pest. So less waters causes the forest to dry out. Mexico actually does have quite a bit of forest. And when this happens, it allows pests to infest. So bark beetles are a very major issue, causing so much damage. They have infested 200,000 acres in New Mexico. And this causes trees to die off. It causes trees to have to be destroyed because they're trying to save other ones. And then, as you know, with trees dying off, you have to plant them and rebuild them, and that takes a lot of time. And if we're in a time of extreme heat, which is causing drought and wildfires, it's not an optimal time to grow new trees. So this is just something that kind of piles on. So looking at the socioeconomic impact, the cost of wildfires. The cost of wildfires is actually pretty eye-opening if you look at the chart that we have over here to the side. So from 2009 to 2012, there were over 5,000 wildfires. That's a lot. And the damages were over 2 million acres of wildland. That's a lot of wildland. This is where we have our protected species. This is where we have our protected forests. This is where we have our state parks. And this is, like I said, extremely eye-opening. There's also on the list, you'll see prescribed fires. And those actually can be helpful under the right circumstances. If you have a prescribed fire, it goes in there and it burns. It's a low burn that can burn out like the excess brush and stuff, but it doesn't burn down trees. It's not so hot and so fast that animals can't move on. So a prescribed wildfire is actually a good thing. So if we have the opportunity to be able to do those, it can actually help in the future when we do have the wildfires. Some other impacts we'll see is it causes changes to wildlife habitat, damages to infrastructure, changes to ecosystem. It adds pollution to the air and water. That's bad for humans, it's bad for animals, it's bad for plants, and damage to historical sites. There's nothing worse than losing a historical site due to a wildfire. And now to the cost of bark beetles. So in 2002 and 2013, there was a mass loss of pinyon trees of over 300 million. That's very a lot of trees gone. So the dry weather dries the trees and they can't produce resin, and the resin is actually what produces the trees. Looking a little bit closer, in 2021, 67,000 acres of pinyon trees were infested due to the drought. Um, and even when we get out of those drought years and it starts to rain again and our moisture is correct, it actually takes years of good rain after the drought to correct the issue in the trees. That way the trees have enough moisture to produce the resin to keep the beetles off of them. So possible mitigations that we can look into for New Mexico is for wildfires. An interesting fact about the wildfires, 87% of the problem is caused by humans. So only you can prevent forest fires. Listen to Smokey. You have to pay attention when we are in a drought, when we're in extreme heat, when the fire warnings go out. Anybody who's been to any state park, any national forest, any open area in New Mexico knows that they have those fire hazard signs out and you know where it's at. So follow the safety guidelines. Know campfire safety. Know how to properly put out a campfire. Outdoor power equipment needs to be maintained properly and used properly. Responsible shooting, responsible burning. You have people who burn garbage, but you still need to follow the same guidelines. If you're in a high or danger zone for fire, don't be burning stuff outside. Don't flick your cigarette out the window. There just needs to be more awareness, that we can see this in every day. I think sometimes we think of good old Smokey and about being out in the forest and being safe, but we need to be safe in the cities. We need to be safe in our towns, and we need to follow those same guidelines and understand that we can cause a fire in the middle of a park in a city due to drought, just like we can in the middle of a forest. For bark beetles, it's early detection. If we know we're in drought, looking for those beetles. That way we can get the trees treated. And then the trees that are too bad, destroying those trees so they don't continue to infect the other trees. So, future outlook for the area. As temperatures begin to rise in New Mexico, it's New Mexicans that can do the most. We need to be aware of our actions outdoors to prevent wildfires. We need to be prepared for the heat. When fires occur, we need to take correct precautions to protect our health of our humans, animals, and our plant life. And then, we need to look for changes in tourism as the snowpack changes. So if there's going to be less skiing, we add alpine to the ski hills to keep it year round. Another thing to look at is as the heat does continue to rise, is being more aware of the water use that we have. People who have yards, making them zero-scaped so we don't have to use as much water just to keep our flowers alive when we need to keep our environment thriving on, outside of our home. So in conclusion, New Mexico has changed since the time it was covered in volcanoes. Now volcanoes are just outlines in the horizon. And if you've been anywhere to see the volcanoes, I have seen them in Albuquerque and I have seen them near the ice caves. And it is definitely very interesting to read the history of the volcanoes in New Mexico. Over the last year, we've seen a temperature rise, and it looks like with the way things are going, it's just to continue to rise. So we can be prepared for more desert. Also, be prepared for less snowpacks, and that means less runoff and less water availability. So we're gonna have to shift the way that we're living our day-to-day life. And we'll also have to see a shift in the tourism and the way that we cater to the tourist. Wildfires can cause major changes to all environments. So we need to be very cautious and very educated on wildfires. And New Mexico will survive. We will overcome all the changes and continue to be great for those who visit.